and welcome to the show. I'm so glad that you're here. We have got an amazing author with us today. We're going to be talking to R.C. Hand. He wrote a book called The Adventures of the Smith Family. It's an 18th century English adventure romance. Welcome, Ray, is what we can call you, right?
Yes, thank you very much.
Ray, I'm glad that you're here. Let's talk about your book.
Well, it's a story about a young serf who saves the future King of England with his archery skills. And I think it's an important story because it talks about the fundamental moral issues that we all face and the possibility of success from a very humble beginning.
Why don't you expound on that just a little bit more? Where's he starting at, and how's he able to be the hero?
Lawrence is out poaching on the king's land one day, and the future King George III is being robbed by a group of bandits. And Lawrence is in the woods and he sees this happening and uses his archery skills to save the prince. And after that happens, of course, he's taken to see the king, who awards him 3 parcels of land and his family's freedom from the feudal lord who oversees him. So they had nothing, and now he has 3 parcels of land that he hasn't seen. He's never left his little village, and he's about 15 years old. And now he has an opportunity to go out into the world and make his future.
How do you see that relating with community and people today?
Well, he meets a lot of wonderful people. He meets some villains, and he has to make some choices about how he lives his life. He becomes a farmer, and he deals with the tradespeople and the other vendors in town. And his best friend ends up being the clergyman of the town. And he has a sort of a mysterious past. And he takes the place of Lawrence's father while he's now in this village far away from home. And they become close, fast friends. And through this story, we learn about the past of the clergyman. He has a very interesting and checkered past. And some very interesting things happen to Lawrence. He meets these people who help him understand about trading with customers and being honest and forthright. And he is put in positions where he has to make decisions that affect other people around him. And he has to be the person to step forward, so to speak, at a very young age. And while some people do exactly what he does, under different circumstances, they would be punished. He does these things and he's rewarded with land and freedom. And he's constantly struggling with where God is in this in his life. Does God have a plan for him? Is he being helped by God? And this book is a conversation with the clergyman about his part, about God's part in his life. And that became a big part of the story. There's other parts of the story also. There's romance and there's travel. And it's the first book of a trilogy. The second book is finished. I haven't started the third book yet.
Wow. It begs a bigger question of good things happening to bad people, bad things happening to good people, and that big question, you know?
Absolutely. And he doesn't have a unscathed adventure in this life of his. He goes through trials and tribulations as we all do. And it's how he deals with them that determines what kind of a man he becomes, because he's the child when this story starts. And we follow him for maybe 5 to 6, 7 years as he grows into a man, and all these different things happen to him.
How do you hope that people relate the story to them in a personal way? What do you feel like they're going to think and feel actually when they're done reading this?
I think that it will give them pause to think about how one lives his or her life. Sometimes in our society, maybe a lot of times in our society, we don't have time or don't take the time to think about that. And myself as a contractor, serving people, I served people my whole working life. I tried to be fair and honest with people, and I found that to be the route to success as far as I'm concerned. And I think that idea isn't always discussed or explored perhaps as much as it should be. And I think this is a way of doing that. And the book is written for people of it can be read by a person who's 14 or 15 years old. There's nothing in it that's untoward, and there is some warfare and so forth, but not details, gory details or anything like that. There's a love element and a romance, and a family is created, and that's all done in a very tasteful way. And it's but again, it doesn't happen as one might suppose. It's got a very interesting and surprising beginning, to say the least.
The thing I would say about this is that it takes you on a journey, but the historical accuracy is pretty amazing. How did that all get built and filled in so fully and richly?
Well, I read a lot. I had some plans for some other things to happen in his life, which could happen in America because of the Mississippi River, but which can't happen so much in England because the Thames is not a great river further north where he's at. So some changes had to take place in his life. He didn't have some opportunities that someone in America would have had that lived next door to a great river where you could send commerce into the big cities.
Wow.
And so that's part of the story. And he's kind of, he's an entrepreneur who has no knowledge of how to be one. And he learns everything one step at a time by watching those around him. And the only thing that he has really at his disposal is his integrity and his character. He did not have a very good work ethic when he worked on the farm for the Lord. And of course, now he's become a farmer. He has to change that attitude to survive. He has to create a house for himself and create a product to sell so that he can survive. And his character goes through a tremendous change because of those circumstances.
And again, when we talk about being relatable, anyone who's ever started a business or, tried to be an entrepreneur in some way, realizing very, very fast that being honest and doing things that serve the customer is where you're going to have success. Having good character is where
that has been my experience. I had many people who I dealt with who did not do that. And their career was rather short-lived. I was in business for 38 years.
Wow. And it's neat how you put yourself into that character. You built that very important moral into that character.
Yes, I've written other books, but I think this one has this important story to it. And I cannot explain, I don't think many people can explain their process of creating these characters. It happens by accident and without any control. I don't have a rich religious history, and yet the main character is a clergyman who took over the book and created the path for Lawrence. And they have these long philosophical discussions. That's not really my background. Right. I'm open to that, but I was quite surprised when this person showed up and became one of the main characters of the story. I don't do an outline. I sit down cold and start writing.
Wow.
So I am as surprised as anyone who reads the book as to what's happening in the next chapter. And it's fascinating adventure for me. I enjoy it very much.
Well, one of the things in the reviews that is consistent is that the characters are so well developed that you feel like you know each one so well. So it's hard to believe that you're sitting down cold doing these without having, avatars already created because they're so developed.
Well, it's interesting because as I develop them and relationships with other characters, then I create the outline so I can keep track of all these relationships.
Wow. Wow. Very, very wonderful.
So I do it. Well, I'm left-handed, so I do everything backwards.
I think that's a great note to end on. I wish we had more time, but we are out of time. Share again one more time the Adventures of the Smith Family and where it's available.
It's on my website at cowboyproductions52.com, and there's a direct link to Amazon, and it's in the Kindle Lending Library also.
Well, consider purchasing this book. I think that you're going to really enjoy how deep and rich the characters have been developed and the wonderful moral to the story. So thank you, R.C. Hand, for the Adventures of the Smith Family, and we'll check in with you again sometime soon.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.